So this is physics, college physics. One thing I want to make sure everyone knows is occasionally people sign up for this who mean to be signing up for calculus-based physics that you would need for if you're going to major in physics or if you're going to major in engineering. So if anybody is here, planning to major in engineering or anything like that, you should talk to me about it. There are actually some departments this will work for, but most it won't. So anyways, we're going to just ease into it today. I'm just going to talk about the structure of the class, the grading format, that kind of thing, and show you where to find stuff. It'll take way less than 80 minutes, so you'll get out early today. And then on Wednesday, we'll start with the material for the class. And then half of the people here have lab today and half have lab on Wednesday. So if you have lab today, that starts at the usual time, which is 1:30. But that's going to be quick today too. There's like a little activity you have to do that'll take about 30 minutes and then you'll be done. So we all, it's hard to start. Let's start slow. Okay. The thing down here at the bottom is, so instead of doing lectures on the whiteboard, as long as this is working, hopefully it will be, I'll be doing lectures on the computer screen on a tablet. And that lets me record videos of everything I'm doing as long as it's working. And so that's what is going to be happening. You'll be able to watch videos of any of the lectures. So it's helpful. It's most helpful if you miss a class, then everything you need to watch the class is available to you. It's also helpful if you want to go back and, look at something again that went by too fast or whatever. So I had some problems with this last semester. So if it doesn't work, I can switch to the board, and I have videos and stuff from previous semesters that you can watch. So that stuff will still be available, but hopefully it'll work this time. Okay, well, the first thing you have to know for this class is you have to know how to get on D2L. Anybody who's taken classes at Normandale is used to D2L. But here's how you get there. Go to the drop-down menu on the right. So this is the main Normandale webpage. Go over here to current students. And then below the picture, D2L is one of the choices you have. So go to D2L. Sign in with your star ID. And if anybody has any trouble signing into D2L, let me know and I can point you to the right people. Okay, so the first thing that happens is you get a list of all the classes you're taking for the semester. This is college physics, so go there. And when you first get into the D2L page for the class, the first thing you see is the announcements. And you should get used to going to this and looking at the announcements at least once a day. Anytime I post a new assignment or, fix something or have information you need to know, I'll mention it in the announcements. Okay, so look at that first and that'll tell you where to go from there. The other things that you need to know on the D2L page are for all the assignments and all the grades, that stuff is under this assessments pull down. So you're going to submit assignments electronically. And to do that, you'll go to assessments and then assignments. I don't have any, posted yet because we haven't assigned anything, but this is the place that you'll put your files. And And by the way, your files can just be photos or scans of work you do on pencil and paper, you know. The grades are also under assessments. So, and I'll keep that updated very regularly so you can always check where you're at in the class. But today, the thing that we need is the stuff under content. So if you go to content, there are a bunch of categories over here on the left. Course information is where the syllabus is, so that's what we're going to be spending most of our time on today. There are also lecture notes by topic and videos by topic. Those are the ones that were recorded previously, but if you want to look ahead or see sort of a different wording of the same topics we're doing in this class, that's all there. So if you go to lecture notes, say you want to look at something about vectors, click on that, and you can just see everything that I wrote on the tablet as I gave the lecture. And so it looks like this. These are helpful for going back and skimming the notes to get ready for lecture quizzes and to get ready for exams and stuff like that. And if instead of going to lecture notes, you go to lecture videos, and if you go to the same video, so say I clicked on this vectors video, what you would see is the video of me writing those notes, and you'd hear my voice as I go. So it'd be just sort of like watching the lecture. Okay. Then problem walkthroughs. There are a few problems over the course of the semester that I've done kind of extensive solutions to problems. So you can follow along with my thought process as I go through problems. And at various times, it'll tell you to pause the video and try to do this next step and then continue the video. And so these are something to look for if you're having trouble with any problems. You can see if there are any of these problem walkthroughs that are relevant. I'm also happy to do problems for the class. So like, you know, I can't yet because we haven't given any problems, but as the course goes on, at the start of most classes, I'll ask if you have any questions on problems, any problems you'd like to see done, and I can give little hints or go through the problem and that kind of thing. And then after every class, I'm going to give a set of daily problems to work on. That's this. So, you know, I might say at some point in the semester, the assignment for today is 2D particle kinematics problems 4 through 7. Okay. So you would go to the 2D particle kinematics, and then you would go to problems 4 through 7, and that's the assignment that's due for that day. One thing that's important for you to remember about these daily problems is there are solutions posted for all of these. Every single one of these problems, there's a solution posted here. And so obviously you could just, you know, copy down the solution and turn it in, but it's just not a good way to learn this material. So the way you want to use these solutions is you want to try as hard as you can to do the problems without looking at the solutions. And then either use the solutions to check your steps to make sure that you thought about it right. Or if you get stuck somewhere in the middle, you can look at this for a hint to get going again. But if you need a hint to get through this or multiple hints to get through it, later you should come back to that problem and try to do it again. Making sense out of these daily problems is the most important part of this class. If you can make sense out of these problems, if you can do these problems and say, if someone asked you about one of these problems, you could explain the steps of how to do it, answer their questions about why you did this and this, then you'll do great in the class. Okay. So you don't want to rely on these solutions. Those are just there for help when you need it or to check your work. Okay. But most of what we're going to do today is just talk about the syllabus, go through the syllabus. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I've gone through so far? Okay, so the class syllabus is under course information. And I have it divided into two. You guys are sections 11 and 12, so this is the one that's relevant for you. Okay, so there's the course syllabus. It's a 4-credit class, a 3-credit class plus a lab. So what does it mean that it's 4 credits? That tells you something about the workload you should expect. And I want to be really clear about this because I think things have gone a little haywire for all of us over COVID. And I think a lot of students and a lot of professors too don't really know what to expect when a class starts. So I just want to be really clear about what my expectations are going to be. If you look up the workload for a college class for a given number of credits, if you Google that, you'll find a bunch of websites that give you the same answer. It's always the same answer. You should expect to do 2 to 3 hours of work outside of class for every hour in class. Okay. A 4-credit class means 4 hours of instruction. Normandale does it a little funny with the labs and whatever, but just to get a general sense of how much work you're going to be expected to do, think of it as 4 hours a week of instruction. That means 8 to 12 hours of work outside of the class. Okay. So this class, if you add up the instruction hours plus the study hours, you should expect this to be a total time commitment of, 12 to 16 hours a week. Okay. That's a pretty significant amount of time. I really think almost anybody could get away with the short end of that, but let's just think about it like that. Think about 12 hours a week that you're going to spend either in class or in lab or working on homework or making sense out of this material, okay? The vast majority of people who don't get through this class successfully just aren't putting in that amount of time, okay? I mean, that's just really all it comes down to. If you have reasonable algebra skills and you put in 12 hours a week on this class, I really think you're going to do great, okay? But you might want to look at your schedule and make sure that you can fit that amount of time into your schedule, okay? And figure out when it's going to fit in, think about your work schedule, your other classes, and think about what days, what times am I going to fit in this time, I would really recommend doing that at the start. The meeting times, so we're in the lecture right now, Mondays and Wednesdays from 12 to 1:20. And then the class is divided up into section 11 that has labs after the class on Monday, and section 12 that has lab after the class on Wednesday. If you don't know what section you're in, let me know and I can find out for you. And by the way, if you're signed up for one of these, say you're signed up for section 11, but sometimes maybe there's a day when the Wednesday lab works better for you, that'll work fine. We have enough room in these classes that you can just go to whichever one works. Okay, so that's an option you always have, including when I get down lower to talk about lab exams. If you can't make it to your scheduled lab exam, but you can make it to the one on the opposite day, feel free to just show up. You don't have to tell me beforehand. You can just take the test on the other lab, okay? My name's Gaio Lakin. Just call me Gaio, please. So this is my contact information, but the best way to get a hold of me is to use the D2L Instant Messenger. It's just easier for me to not lose those because, I get a lot of emails, and then, like the more emails come in, and then the old emails get pushed below the screen, and then I forget about them before I get to answer them. So anyways, it works well if you just use, it's right here up in the upper right on D2L. Just use that instant messenger. I'll check that every morning first thing. So, I'll always be able to respond to you by the next morning. And I try to do it more often than that, but definitely by the next morning. My office hours are Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to 3:20, and Fridays from 12 to 1:50. And if you want to meet, but those don't work for you, I can schedule to meet outside of those too. And I can also schedule Zoom calls if you want to do it remotely. The office hours that are scheduled here, notice that I'm not doing those in my office. I'm doing them in the tutoring center. So there's room for more people to sit down. And this is the room number of the tutoring center. It's kind of on the second floor of the main Normandale building, kind of right in the middle of everything. It's pretty easy to find. It's the room with all glass walls facing the hallway. There's no required textbook for this class. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. I do that because I want to limit the amount of information that you're responsible for, and then I want you to do your best to remember what I tell you as well as you can, So the only information you're responsible for is what I say in class, and I give you the notes for that. I give you the videos for that. But I want you to go back and look at those notes and remind yourself of stuff as the semester goes on. So the trade-off is I'm not throwing 600 pages of textbook reading at you, but the small number of information that, smaller amount of information that I am giving you, I expect you to try to remember well, Since there's no textbook, the only materials you need are a calculator. And I don't know. When I started here, not everybody had smartphones. Now everybody does. And so you need calculators for tests. You can use your phone for homework and everything else, but you need calculators for tests. I can bring some, but if you have one, so if you don't have one and you don't really want to buy one, that I can deal with a small number of people in the class like that. So if you have one, please bring it so other people can use the calculators I have, I guess. Notice that your calculator has to have trigonometric functions because we're going to do some trigonometry in this class. As far as reference books, I know that some people taking this class are getting ready for MCATs and other standardized tests. So at some point after this class is over, you might want to get a book for future reference. And so these are two good choices, I think, for books if you want to get one. But I would not recommend using any outside sources during this class. I'm going to explain this stuff in the clearest way I can to get you ready for the kind of questions that I'm going to ask. And so if you go to another book, they'll use different notation. They'll describe things different ways. I think you'll just find it confusing, you know. So if there's something you don't understand in the way that I've explained it, I really think the best way to go is just to come talk to me about it and get it clarified, you know. There's one prerequisite for this class, that's college algebra. And like I was saying, everything that you need for this class is going to be given on D2L. Okay, the topics that we're covering in Physics 1. So the introductory physics sequence is divided up into Physics 1 that deals with objects flying through space and forces between objects and things like that. And then Physics 2, that's all electricity and magnetism. So this is the one that is connected to the things that you're familiar with. You know, everybody's played ball, everybody's rolled things, see what happens, bump things into each other. And that means that the stuff that we cover in this class, you have intuition about. When you get to electricity and magnetism, you don't have a ton of intuition to go on. You just kind of have to learn how to do these calculations. But in Physics 1, your brain will always tell you, like, okay, if these two things, if you smack these two things together, what's going to happen? If you spin this around and let go of it, what's going to happen? That's good news and bad news. Usually it's good news, but there are a few cases where most likely your intuition about what's going to happen is wrong. That's just true of most people. And so when those cases come up, I'm going to try to be clear about it. Like, here's something where you probably are not thinking about this right. And so you have to sort of actively undo what your brain is telling you is going to happen and replace it with what really happens. And this first activity that we're going to do in lab this week deals with those cases, a lot of those cases where your intuition, you feel pretty sure you know what's going to happen, but you don't, you know. The grading scale for this class. Okay, it looks like it's a high grading scale. It tends to be about 92, 82, 70, 60. I might relax it a little if the grades are lower than I mean them to be. But the reason I use those higher grade cutoffs is just because all of the things that I grade carefully are very similar to problems that I will have given you as example problems, and they're similar to problems that you've done in the daily assignments. And so if you've done the work to prepare for these exams, you won't ever be really surprised by anything that comes up on an exam. It'll all look pretty familiar, you know. And so people tend to do pretty well on exams. And so this is just a grading scale that I've found to be pretty good, you know. If anything, I probably give more A's and B's than most college physics teachers. So don't worry about it looking like it's really hard to get certain grades or whatever. This class grade is going to be divided up into 10% for lab exams, 10% for lecture quizzes, 10% for daily assignments, and then 20% for weekly assignments and 50% for exams. Okay. And so now I'm just going to go through each of these categories one by one and describe what each of these mean. Before I go into these categories of things, does anyone have any questions about the structure of the class? Okay, so 10% of the grade is lab exams. Our labs are going to be focused on improving your intuition of what happens. You know, like I said, when two rolling objects run into each other, or you spin something on a string and cut the string, you know, those kind of things. It takes practice to have intuition about the direction of the velocity, the direction of the acceleration, all these different things, the direction of the total force acting on the object. And so that's what we're going to spend our time doing in labs. And 3 times during the semester, the lab period is going to be taken up by an exam where I just ask you to answer questions similar to these things that we'll be working on. Okay. And the dates of these lab exams are given here. So, like, for example, if you have lab on Mondays, lab exam 1 is going to be on Monday, September 11th in lab. Lab exam 2 is going to be on Monday, October 23rd in lab. And lab exam 3 is going to be Monday, November 27th in lab. Okay. Those, none of them are worth a lot of points. They add up to 10%. So each one individually is like 3 1/3% of your grade. It's not a very high stakes thing, but it's just making sure that you're trying to make sense out of the lab activities and then going back and refreshing your memory on it periodically. Okay. And like I said, if you can't make it to your scheduled lab exam, feel free to go to the other one. If you're scheduled on Monday, but you can't make it on September 11th, come to the lab on Wednesday, September 13th, and you can take it and no problem. Okay. 10% of the grade is also made up of lecture quizzes. So those are always going to be on Wednesday in class at the end of class. And they'll just be 5 or 10-minute things where I'll ask short answer questions about stuff I said in the lectures. For me, the purpose of giving these lecture quizzes is so that you don't just come to class and take notes, but you also occasionally go back and reread your notes and try to make sense, try to remember what I said, try to put it all in a sort of cohesive package in your brain. So there won't be any calculations on the quizzes. It's just going to be like, say, what is Newton's third law? Obviously we haven't talked about that yet, but later that's going to be a big thing in the class. So what is Newton's third law? And you can write it in whatever wording you want. There's a few ways to describe it. But I just want to make sure that you're remembering what I consider to be the main points in the class, And I'm not trying to make these quizzes really tricky with like really fine minutia. I'm going to try to make them focus on the things I consider to be really important. But that's what those are about. It won't be every Wednesday, maybe every other Wednesday. So let's say that there'll be something like 8 total lecture quizzes. The lowest 2 quizzes get dropped from your grade. So even if you could miss 2 lecture quizzes, and that still wouldn't affect your grade. But so let's say there are 8 total lecture quizzes, 2 scores get dropped. So then 10% of your grade is made up of 6 lecture quizzes. So each one is worth, what's that, 16.6, 1.66% of your grade, each quiz, Again, it's not worth very much, but they add up to about a letter grade. Any questions about quizzes? So the key thing is quizzes, there's no calculations, it's just short answer. It's just sort of whether you remember something or not. Whereas the exams that we'll get to later are all just problem calculations. 10% of your grade is daily assignments. So these are the ones that after every class, I'll tell you what's assigned. Not today, because we're not starting material today, but starting Wednesday. There are full solutions posted for all of those. I really don't grade these at all. I just make sure that you did them. So I'm just grading these 0, you didn't do it, or 1, you did do it. And the only reason I'm collecting them is to make sure that you stay on schedule. So you don't, because I find if I don't ask you to turn them in, people think like, okay, well, I'm really busy until Wednesday. I'll do this Wednesday, but then the next assignment comes, things start to pile up. So instead, I'm going to give due dates and have you turn them in. There are, I guess, there's 16 weeks, 2 classes per week, so 32 classes. So there'll be 32 or so of these daily assignments, somewhere in that ballpark. I dropped the lowest 2 scores, and 10% of your grade is based on turning in, how many of these assignments you turn in. And if you ever miss the deadline, miss the late deadline, don't turn one of these assignments in. It doesn't really affect your grade as long as you only do that once or twice. But because understanding these problems is the most important part of this class, you should still make sure that you go through those problems at some point, okay? Understanding these daily problems is the most important single thing in this class, even though it doesn't add up to a very big part of your grade, okay? And so you'll do these problems on paper, pencil and paper, then you'll take a photo of it or scan it and submit the photo or scan. That's how that stuff will be turned in, okay? Then there's also going to be weekly assignments. They're not any harder than the daily assignments or anything like that, but I don't give the solutions and I grade these carefully. Okay, so that's why I give this a higher weighting in your grade. You can feel free to work together to understand these, but don't copy each other's work. So if you work together with somebody to understand how to do it, that's great. But then you should go off on your own and write up the solution to the problem. And you should be able to do it without looking at the notes you made when you were meeting together, okay? If you can do it without looking at your notes, then you understand how to do the problem. If you need to look line by line at the notes, then you never made the step from making that idea, the idea that you, maybe got from talking to someone else. You never really made that an idea that you understand. So that's an important distinction to make, okay? Because copying someone else's work is cheating. Understanding work by talking to somebody is not cheating. If anybody has any questions about that distinction, I'd be happy to talk about that more. But I want to try to make that as clear as I can because since COVID, there's been more issues with cheating in my classes, and I want to make sure that we don't have any misunderstandings. So the weekly assignments, these are the ones that I will grade carefully. I'll drop the lowest weekly assignment score from your grade. Yeah, and those will be turned in on D2L the same way as the daily assignments. Anybody have any questions about anything up to this point? Okay, the biggest chunk of your grade is exams. There are 4 of them, so each one is worth 12.5%. I give you sort of like a mulligan where if you get a bad score on one of your first 3 exams and a higher score on the 4th exam, the final, then I'll count exam 4, it counts as exam 4, but I'll also take that score and replace the bad score with it, So if you got, let's say you got 40% on exam 1 and then 80s on exam 2 and exam 3, and then a 90 on exam 4. That 90 for exam 4 would replace your score of 40 on exam 1, and your grade would be based on a 90, an 80, an 80, and a 90. Okay. That also works if you have an unexcused absence for an exam. Then after the exam, you get a 0, because you weren't there. But after you take exam 4 at the end of the class, whatever you get on exam 4 replaces that 0. Okay. If you know ahead of time that you can't make it to an exam, though, let me know and we can make alternate accommodations. And the dates of the exams are given there. They're all on Wednesdays. I don't know off the top of my head what our scheduled final period is, but let me know if you need that soon, because it's available. I just don't have it right now. Yeah, any questions on exams? Okay, labs. There's not explicitly a grade associated with the labs, but I do take attendance and you have to go to the labs. You can miss 2 labs without it affecting your grade. If you miss a lab, you should make sure that you get the lab handout and make sure that you figure out by talking to me, or I can give you a link to a video that'll help with it. But you need to figure out how to do the questions on that lab, whether you were there or not, because they're going to be on those lab exams, and those are what do count for your grade. But besides that, you can miss 2 labs and pass the class. If you miss a 3rd one, you fail the class. So, basically just come to all the labs, I think, is the way to go. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about in some detail is cheating, because like I said, over the COVID years, this became more of a problem. There are websites available where you can just submit physics and math problems, and they have their people there. They call them tutors, but they're not really tutors. They just solve these problems. And so during COVID, when there were a lot of take-home exams and stuff, people would use these websites to do their take-home exams. The biggest one of these is called Chegg. And it definitely makes things more of a pain for instructors. I will tell you that, I can always tell. So I can always tell whether somebody has learned physics from me or has learned physics from someone else. Okay. It's not necessarily cheating to learn how to do these problems from someone else and then do it that way on an assignment. But when I see it, it does make me wonder where this person figured this stuff out, and it makes me do a little more digging, And so if I do some digging and I find the solution that you turned in and it's just copied, then that's cheating. And then we have a problem we have to deal with. I would recommend just I don't know what other instructors think about their classes, and that's their business. But in my class, just don't use that stuff. It's just kind of asking for trouble. I give you already the solutions to the things I want you to have solutions for. When I don't give you solutions, it's because I don't want you to have the solutions. So I would say just don't even use those websites. I will say the way that I usually catch people cheating is that those websites often have solutions that make a mistake somewhere. And if someone turns in a solution that not only matches a solution on one of these websites, but has an exact identical mistake at some point, it's pretty hard to argue that you weren't copying it, And so, I don't know. I don't like cheating is the last thing I want to think about, but I also want the grades that people earn in this class to mean something. And so I have to be sort of careful about that. And so please don't get caught up in that. Anybody have any questions about cheating policy or anything like that? If someone gets caught cheating once, they get a 0 on whatever they cheated on. If they get caught cheating a second time, it's an F in the class. And I taught a fully online physics class this summer, and 5 of the 26 people who finished the class got Fs for cheating. And I hate that, but you know, it was clear and obvious, and there was no and so that's how it is, you know. So don't let that happen. And then down here, there's some additional resources that might be helpful to you. I'm not going to read through all these, but some Normandale resources. So you might want to glance at that. Does anybody have any questions overall about the class? Anything I talked about? Okay, yes. Yeah, that's right. Let's talk after class about that. I think probably, so it does mean you shouldn't take this class, but it might be fine. Let's just talk about it after, okay? Because really, there's not too much that you need that's specifically from college algebra. Mostly, you just need to be comfortable with algebra, okay? Any other questions? Okay, well, that's all I have to say for today. Wednesday, you're here, right, for the grand finale, for the fireworks. Yep.
Lab attire?
Oh, nothing like that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing dangerous or anything like that. You can bring drinks or whatever. Yeah, it's not like a chemistry lab. Any other questions? Okay, so I will post a video of this lecture as long as it's all working the way it's supposed to today. So you can see what the lecture videos look like. I'll put a link on D2L so you can find it easily. There's no assignment for today. And then Wednesday, we'll start talking about unit conversions and start getting into course material. And then the first assignment will be given after the Wednesday class. And so make sure you know when your lab is this week. It's only going to take half an hour to 45 minutes, but you have to be there. So half of you are today at 1:30 and half are Wednesday at 1:30. Okay, see you in lab.